Can you hear me now? All right. Okay. Hey, Liberty Heights family. I don't know if anybody is tuning in with us. I'm coming to you live from our basement again. And so it's a weird to live a good chunk of our lives in our basement right now. And then also, I want to get in a little close here. I don't know if you guys can see this hair. It hasn't been cut in a while. And so it's a televangelist. This is the Jim Baker. And so earlier, it was the what I like to call the pandemic part, or the coronavirus comb over. But as it's gotten even longer, I've now just went straight back into the Jimmy Swaggart, and so I think it's flattering. Yeah, I think it's flattering, and I think it makes me look young and handsome, even more. So hopefully you're tuning in and already you're encouraged, inspired, and equipped already with this. And so, but on all seriousness, we want to jump on today. And so some of the Facebook live and online that I've been leading has either been centered around maybe a devotion or some kind of key update or strategy. And so today I want to share a little bit with you about a milestone that we hit a couple weeks ago that you are not aware of because we weren't gathering together to celebrate that in a normal and intentional way that we would. And so on Easter, it marked the 1 year and ticking launch date for our Middletown campus that we announced at the beginning of this year. And so our goal was to open up a fourth campus in Middletown on Easter of 2021. So if you're kind of thinking through campuses, you probably going to come to mind two physical campuses. We have two campuses on our physical location. We have our original campus, Liberty Township, and then we also have LHC Espanol. And so, from a multi-site perspective, LHC Espanol, with its own meeting time, its own language, its own pastor, is by all definitions considered a campus. in the multi-campus conversation. And then obviously we launched a Lebanon campus, and so there's some exciting updates there as well that we hope to share in the very near future with that. So even though we haven't been physically meeting, there's been significant progress being made, and particularly with our Lebanon campus, some new developments that we hope to share with you soon. So when we think of three campuses, it's three campuses on two physical locations. So several years ago, I lose track of time, probably about 2 years ago, I guess, we began to explore the concept of what does it look like for a church that's in an area that has abundant resources, and God has blessed to be a good steward of those resources and to come alongside others who may not have significant resources as well. And so, as a step into that, several years ago, we began a partnership with Inner City Detroit. It is a great partnership. We probably, over a period of several years, had a few hundred people go on a short term mission trip to Detroit. And that was exciting and encouraging and inspiring. But the reality is, what we discovered is that no matter how much we tried to encourage that fellowship, no matter how many people we took on a mission trip, the other 51 weeks out of the year that we weren't there was simply left too much of a void to help change the culture of that church, strengthen that church in the ways that we felt like it needed strengthened. And so we just realized that we were there to encourage them in a week and help with some projects, but we couldn't help in a way that we felt like produced long-term revitalization and a culture change. And so what we realized is that the challenge is proximity. And so even though Detroit is not far away, because they were far enough away, we needed to find a partnership similar to that, that was within close proximity, 15, 30 minutes of our original campus, that we could have a consistent presence there in an under-resourced area to share our resources with and make a gospel difference there. So we began to pray about that and realize that just to the south of us, in some areas of Hamilton, and just to the north of us, in Middletown, there are some areas that are struggling areas, neighborhoods that have gotten left behind, or maybe have a higher crime rate, or just have just some unique challenges that, due to proximity, we may be in a better position to help. Now, one of our deep convictions is that we believe that the local church is the hope of the world. That statement is not original with us, but we certainly subscribe to it. And so it's not enough to go in and do ministry in an area and do nice things and do what they call in church world drive-bys. And so we want to actually set up a church, because the church is God's plan A for making disciples. And the church is God's plan A for communicating the gospel out to a community. And so we weren't content just to go into an area a couple times a year, or maybe even once a month, and do ministry. We wanted a local church presence, and so that discipleship can take place on a regular basis. That's the hope for those in need of the gospel. So we began to be committed to planting a church in a higher needs area, and so through that process, we looked at some opportunities in Hamilton, because again, that's just to the south of us in regards to proximity. And then we looked at Middletown as well. And so due to our partnership with Hope House and then some other providential circumstances, we felt like Middletown was the best option to do that. And so we had a burden for this, and we had a kind of a target area. We drove around 4 different communities in Middletown, and we found one that seemed to be struggling equally, if not greater, than some of the other neighborhoods. And we also discovered that this particular community does not have a local church present in that community. And so I can't help but think of the words that Paul said, that he wanted to preach Christ where Christ had not been known. And so we felt like there was a void of hope in that neighborhood, and there was a void of a local church as a conduit of God's hope in that neighborhood. So we began to zero on that neighborhood. And then also, it just happened to be in the exact neighborhood where Hope House was opening up their new men's shelter. And obviously, we have a fantastic partnership with Hope House. And so all those providential things coming together, we thought was a great opportunity. However, most of those conversations were taking place on a staff level. And the reason was in my consultation or getting consultation, I guess, with an effective multi-site pastor in another state who's done a great job with multi-site. He gave me some great counsel that we've shared over and over. And he said this. He said, in order to be effective in a community, you don't need a demographic report. You don't need a prospectus put together for a new plant. You don't need a great fundraising strategy. He said, you have to have a person with a passion for a place. And so we had a plan, we had a place, and we had a burden through that. And so what we didn't have is a person with a passion for a place. So fast forward, and Pastor Chris, as you know, went through the Send Network, which is our national network of churches, went through the Send Network church planter training. And as a part of the official relaunch of Lebanon, we've partnered with the Send Network, and they're helping us with funding and some resources for church planters through that. And so at one of his church planter meetings, and I believe it might have been one of the assessments, he struck up a friendship with a guy at his table. And the guy said, man, I live not far from you guys, and I have a heart to do a church plant in a high needs area where people may be devoid of hope. And so Chris said, I don't know if this is God's will or not, but I think you should at least have a conversation with this guy and just explore this a little bit. And so that brings me to introduce again, for those of you who have not met, Michael Callahan. And so Kyle's the Kyle's the great Oz behind the curtain. You guys can't see Kyle on these. So Kyle, is Michael live with us on the screen now? I don't hear from Kyle, so I'm going to assume that's it. Yes,
Okay.
yes. All right. So, Michael, glad you can join us. So, Michael is joining us from his workplace today. And so, Michael, tell everybody where you work at as your daytime job right now.
So my daytime job, I am a rehab manager at Mount Healthy Christian Villages. So it's a nursing home assisted living center. I manage the rehab department and do therapy, help people walk, those types of things. So
Okay.
great way to minister to people here as well.
Okay. So, Michael, due to the virus to not be able to get out, have you grown a beard during this time or just a bigger beard?
Just a bigger beard. There has been some concern that I may have to shave it, but let's hope not.
We'll pray accordingly. I had a guy tell me one time, he said there are two kinds of men. He said there are men with beards and there are women. Would you say amen to that?
Amen.
Okay. Well, so some of you have met Michael. Obviously, when we introduced Michael, we launched this idea of a new campus. We were super excited about that. And but some of you may be newer to Liberty Heights, or maybe you weren't there that Sunday. We've announced that. And so now that we've kind of hit the 1 year mark of our tentative launch date of Easter 2021, I guess it's not tentative at this point. We want to start bringing greater awareness, not only to the upcoming plant next year, but then also just getting Michael's face out there in front of people, both campuses. LHCE, I guess you could go there as well if you had a translator and get awareness there as well. And but then also just starting to ramp up communication about how people can partner, how they can get involved, some of those things as well. So one of the things that, just backing up a little bit, Michael, you know this story, and I think I shared it when we made this initial announcement, but maybe for those who weren't a part of that. So a few years ago, I was on social media, and a pastor made a comment. I believe it was on Twitter, and just made a comment, and it's one of those comments you read it and you just can't shake it. You can't get away from it. Kind of haunts you in a good way. And the comment was, if you really believe the local church is the hope of the world, then you had better start planting churches in hopeless places, or certainly places that feel hopeless. And that began to grip my heart. I could not shake that thought. The church I came from was located in a community that's very white collar, very professional, affluent community, and everybody and their brother wanted to plant a church in that community. And then same thing in the Mason, Westchester area. I've been here 10 years, and in that time, there have been I can't even count how many church plants that have tried to open in Mason and Westchester area. And so, we used to joke, this is everybody and their brother wants to plant a church where there's lots of perceived wealthy people. And so, but at that same time, so been at Liberty Heights 10 years, and I was at my previous church about 4.5 years. So the last 14 and a half years, there was no churches planted in Franklin. There was one church that we know of planted in Hamilton. There was one church maybe planted in Middletown. So you have all these communities that would not be considered as affluent as Mason and Westchester area, and nobody's wanting to plant a church there, and everybody's wanting to plant a church in Mason, Westchester, Springboro, where I was at previously. And so I began to get grieved by that and burdened about that, and realized that some of these more difficult areas of Middletown that we looked at, and some in Hamilton, they probably feel devoid of hope. Certainly, that gives some of that appears when you drive through there from the just the physical landscape. A lot of empty houses and boarded up houses and blight and things like that. And so just being get deeply convicted. And so through that research, found out there's a national organization, Acts 29, which I'd known about for years, but they had started an initiative within that organization called Church in Hard Places. And it's really a national movement, and some resources and conference related to the idea of planting churches in some of these difficult demographic communities, with the hopes of bringing hope to people that may feel hopeless, and in doing that. And so I went to a conference for that and met one of the national directors and read the book, and there's all kinds of resources now online. So that's kind of my entry and journey, I think, into a church in hard places mentality. And so, Michael, kind of share with us some of your journey into that, and where you've been in ministry, and what you've enjoyed, and how God positioned you to say, hey, I think this unique type of calling is what God has in store for you. So share a little bit with us about that.
Yeah, so I've been in ministry now for 10 or 12 years. I started kind of in a smaller situation, a little bit of a rural town over in Trenton, Ohio. Felt called into ministry, and they're reaching the typical church, what most people do, the kind of middle class, white suburbs. Everything was good, and my father-in-law, who is a pastor in Middletown, asked me to come partner with him in his church. And I remember the first time I went, and I said no. I was like, "There's no way I'm ever coming here."
Yeah.
And so I went back again to the church just for support for him. And he kept kind of pestering me and kind of egging me on, saying, "Hey, I think this is where you should be." And really, God laid it on my heart. He says, "Go where you're most needed, not where you're most comfortable."
Oh, that's good. That's good counsel.
And ever since then, I realized, God has placed a desire in my heart to reach people that other people don't want to reach or are afraid to reach. And I remember going on several mission trips here in Ohio. My wife and I, we were up. It was a Beautiful Feet campaign through the WMU, and we were getting ready to reach a really broad area. And so in this area, there was this really rich upper class area that they're going to hand out light bulbs to, saying that
those folks can't afford light bulbs.
Yeah, so high energy, Jesus is the light. And then we're going to take bread to the poor area and say Jesus is the bread of life. And so there's about 40 of us in this room trying to figure out who's going where. And out of those 40 people, the only 2 people that volunteered to go into the poor area were my wife and me. So we loaded up the back of our truck and started walking around and realizing that there's something different. I didn't think it was anything weird to go into an area like that and to hand out stuff. I've done it before. But I started to see then people are afraid to reach an area like that because of what it may cost them or just perceived ignorance. And so that really started to change my heart of how I see people. And then ministering in Middletown for 10 years, you begin to realize that these people are truly lost, and they just need someone to love them. They don't need another handout. I think a lot of times in poor ministries, we do these things. We do handouts, we do giveaways, we do these types of things, which are fine, but that's not enough. They need life transformation. They need Jesus, and they need someone to come alongside them and walk with them and be willing to get a little dirty. I can't tell you how many times I've been in ministry in the Middletown area, just helping people, and you're going to run into some things that are really, really scary, but at the same time, you realize if you're trusting in Christ, you're safe the entire time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point you made. So many times when churches have done ministry to impoverished areas, it's you become almost a government agency in the sense that its distribution of physical resources, much like government entities would do. When in reality, the best thing we have to offer is the hope of Christ and a changed life. And so in some impoverished areas, there's sometimes not an abundance of resources that are made available through different agencies, entities, other nonprofits. And so those are good things. We don't want to be guilty of, someone starving and we say, "Well, pray for you,"
Yeah.
uh, but at the same time, I think the ministry of the church is unique in the sense that we do good works to gain an audience for the good news. It's meeting needs and sharing Christ. Be like you said, sometimes in impoverished or challenged neighborhoods, it's going in and providing physical resources only. When in reality, those things should be bridged to a greater source of hope than food or clothing ever could provide to do that. So I totally agree with that.